What they saw as submission was me documenting every move, waiting for the right moment. Handed me a cup of coffee. I handed him a plan to unravel everything. The smell was wrong. The smile was forced. The betrayal was real. And so was the recording. He wanted me to drink it. I switched the cup. Now he's the for every time I stayed silent, I took notes. And now I spoke through evidence, one trembling, and I'm finally free. Don't you want to try the coffee I made especially for you? Honey, my husband James asked, with an odd smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. I was sitting at my sister-in-law, Nina's elegant dining table in his... I didn't just catch them. I caught every pattern they thought I'd ignore. Nashville home, wise we gathized for our monthly family brunch. The coffee cup in front of me had a strange, almost metallic smell that made my stomach turn. My name is Miles, and at 29, I never imagined I'd be questioning whether my own husband, their confidence, was built on my caution. But that was their mistake, was trying to poison me. But after 3 years of marriage and countless incidents of accidental food poisoning, I had learned to be cautious, especially around Na. He had a way of orchestrating situations that left me sick or humiliated, always with that same innocent. It wasn't just coffee. It was confirmation, and I never planned to drink it. Smile James was wearing now, how thoughtful of you. I replied, forcing a smile while my mind raced. The aroma wafting from the cup was unlike any coffee I'd smelled before. It reminded me of the time last month when I'd ended up in urgent. You only have to survive once to rewrite the story they thought they'd control care after drinking tea at Nina's house. The doctors couldn't explain my symptoms, and Na had insisted he'd made the tea exactly the same way he made his own. Na watched me intently from across the table, absently stirring his own untouched coffee. James has some betrayals. Aren't loud. They're brewed in silence and served in porcelain. Become quite the barista lately, he said with a smirk. He's been practicing different brewing methods just for you. The way he emphasized for you sent chills down my spine. I had noticed James spending more time at Nina's house lately, claiming they were planning some betrayals. Aren't loud. They're brewed in silence and served in porcelain, a surprise for our upcoming anniversary. But something felt off. The whispered conversations that stopped when I entered the room, the strange texts ID glimpsed on his phone, and now this coffee with its peculiar scent. I lifted the cup, pretending to take a sip. Their confidence was built on my caution. But that was their mistake. While studying their expressions, James and Na exchanged a quick glance that confirmed my suspicions, making a show of checking my phone. I stood up abruptly. Oh, would you look at that? I need to make a quick call for work. Na, would you mind? Their confidence was built on my caution. But that was their mistake. If you see your study. As I walked past Nina's place setting, I deliberately stumbled quickly, switching our coffee cups in the confusion of steadying myself. I'm so sorry, I exclaimed. Straightening up, I'm such a klutz sometimes. Nina waved off my apology. With the some betrayals aren't loud. They're brewed in silence and served in porcelain. Tight smile. Just try not to break anything in the study. I nodded and hurried away. My heart pounding through the study's doorway. I could still see them. At the table now, I just had to wait and watch from the study doorway. I watched for every time I stayed silent. I took notes. And now I spoke through evidence. Na lifted the coffee cup to his lips, and my stomach clenched with anxiety. Part of me wanted to stop his to warn his, but I needed to know the truth. I'd spent too many nights in emergency rooms. Too many hours doubled over in for every time I stayed silent. I took notes. And now I spoke through evidence. Pain, always, after sharing meals with them. It wasn't always like this. When I first met James at a friend's wedding in Nashville. 3 years ago, he was charming and attentive. Na had seemed welcoming. To inviting me to family gathizings and offering to help. You only have to survive once to rewrite the story they thought they'd control. Plan our wedding. But looking back, I should have noticed the red flags, the way he would accidentally spill things on my dress at important events, or how my food always seemed to have extra seasoning when he helped cook. The incident started small, and I didn't just catch them. I caught every pattern they thought I'd ignore. Upset stomach, Jose. Mild allergic reaction. This James always had an excuse ready. Maybe it was something you ate earlier, or you must be coming down with something, but the pattern was becoming clear. The worst was 2 months ago, when I ended up. It wasn't just coffee. It was confirmation, and I never planned to drink it. Hospitalized after eating breakfast at their house. The doctors found traces of something in my system they couldn't identify, but James convinced everyone I must have taken some expired medication. I gripped the door. Frame watching as Na took another sip of the coffee. James, some betrayals aren't loud. They're brewed in silence and served in porcelain, was typing on his phone, seemingly unconcerned. My own untouched cup sat cold on the table while I left it. The metallic smell still lingered in my nose, making me shudder. A slight tremor in Nina's hand caught my attention. He set down the cup. You only have to survive once to rewrite the story. They thought they'd control his face, suddenly pale. James, he said, his voice shaking. Something's wrong. James looked up, his expression changing from confusion to horror as he realized which cup he was drinking from. He jumped up, knocking over his chair. Nah, what's happening? Na's hands were trembling. Some betrayals aren't loud. They're brewed in silence and served in porcelain violently. Now I feel he tried to stand, but stumbled, grabbing the edge of the table for support. James, what did you put in that coffee I stepped out of? The study, my phone already recording James, was beside Na. Now his face, what they saw as submission, was me documenting every move. Waiting for the right moment, Ahen. That wasn't supposed to be your cup, he whispered. But in the silence of the dining room, his words carried clearly. Nina's eyes widened with realization and fear. Call an ambulance. He gasped, sliding to the floor. Please, I can't. I dialed 911 immediately. I didn't just catch them. I caught every pattern they thought I'd ignore, my hands steady despite the chaos unfolding before me. Na was on the floor now, his body racked with violent tremors. James knelt beside his. Panic written across his face as he realized their plan had backfired spectacularly. Emergency services. Yes, we need an ambulance. Some betrayals aren't loud. They're brewed in silence and served in porcelain at 1542 Maple Grove Drive, I said, clearly keeping my phone recording with my this hand. My sister-in-law appears to be having a severe reaction to something in his coffee. He's conscious but experiencing tremors as I spoke to the dispatches. Nina's eyes locked onto their confidence. Was built on my caution, but that was their mistake, mine. The usual cold calculation in his gaze was replaced by raw fear. Miles, he gasped. You switched. You knew, ma'am, the ambulance is on its way. The dispatches assured me. Please stay on the line. James was growing more frantic by the second. Nah, I didn't just catch them. I caught every pattern they thought I'd ignore. What's happening that wasn't supposed to. I mean, it wasn't meant for. Shut up, James. Na snapped through gritted teeth, his anger momentarily overcoming his distress. This is all your fault. You said it would just make his sick enough to miss the board meeting. Some betrayals aren't loud. They're brewed in silence and served in porcelain next week, you promised. It wouldn't be traced. My blood ran cold. The board meeting was I was scheduled to present my proposal for a major client account. The same account Na had been trying to land for months at our competing firms. Everything started for every time. I stayed silent. I took notes. And now I spoke through evidence clicking into place. The tea last month. I said, my voice surprisingly steady. And the breakfast incident 2 months ago, those weren't accidents, were they? Nina's face contorted with another wave of pain. The tea that was supposed to keep you home during the Johnson. Some betrayals aren't loud. They're brewed in silence and served in porcelain. Contract presentation. But you went anyway. He clutched his stomach, doubling over, James said. He said we just needed to discredit. You make clients think you were unreliable. The sound of sirens filled the air outside. James stood up, backing away from both of their confidence was built on my caution. But that was their mistake. Us, nah. Stop talking. You don't know what you're saying? I know exactly what I'm saying. Nah. Spat his words, slurring slightly. We've been planning this for months, ever since Miles started outperforming me at every client meeting you were supposed to make. Sure, it wasn't just coffee. It was confirmation. and I never planned to drink it. Drank it today. The paramedics burst through the front door, and I quickly stepped aside to let them work as they loaded Nina onto a stretchies. I stopped recording and sent the video to my private email. Then to my lawyer. James stood frozen, watching for every time I stayed silent. I took notes, and now I spoke through evidence as his carefully constructed plan crumbled around him. I'll ride with his to the hospital, I told the paramedics, my voice firm. After all, I need to make sure my sister-in-law gets the proper treatment. I met James's terrified game, and I'm sure the doctors it wasn't just coffee, it was confirmation, and I never planned to drink it. Will be very interested in knowing exactly what was in that coffee. The emergency room at Nashville General Hospital was a flurry of activity as doctors rued to treat. I sat in the waiting room, my phone clutched in my hand, reaping the recording. Some betrayals aren't loud, they're brewed in silence and served in porcelain. Of Nina's confession, the tremors in his voice, the panic in his eyes. It was all the evidence I needed to prove this wasn't just paranoia on my part. Family of Na Anderson, a nurse called out. I stood up, noting James's conspicuous absence. It wasn't just coffee, it was confirmation, and I never planned to drink it. He'd mumbled something about parking the car 20 minutes ago and hadn't returned. I'm his sister-in-law, I said, following the nurse through the double doors. How is he? He's stabilized, but we found concerning levels of toxins in his system. The nurse's expression was grave for every time I stayed silent. I took notes. And now, I spoke through evidence. The doctor would like to speak with you about some unusual findings in his blood work. Dr. Phillips, a tall woman with graying hair and sharp eyes, was waiting by Nina's room. Mrs. Bennett, could you tell me exactly what happened before your sister-in-law became? Their confidence was built on my caution. But that was their mistake. I took a deep breath, pulling out my phone. I think you should listen to this first. I played the recording. From brunch, watching the doctor's expression change from professional concern to alarm. This is very serious, he said, making notes on his tablet. Some betrayals aren't loud. They're brewed in silence and served in porcelain. The substance we found isn't something that accidentally ends up in coffee. We're looking at deliberate contamination. Just then, James appeared at the end of the hallway, his face pale and sweaty. He'd clearly overheard the doctor's words. Miles he started taking. A step toward their confidence was built on my caution. But that was their mistake. Let me explain. Stay back, Dr. Phillips warned, pressing the nurse's call button. Security to room 412. Please. James raised his hands in surrender. This is all a misunderstanding. Na was confused. He didn't know what he was saying, really. I pulled up that their confidence was built on my caution, but that was their mistake. Texts I'd discovered on his phone last week, the ones I'd secretly forwarded to myself. So these messages between you and Na about making sure he's out of commission before the Henderson presentation were just friendly conversation. His face drained of color. You went through. I didn't just catch them. I caught every pattern. They thought I'd ignore my phone after I found the strange in your desk drawer. Yes, I did. I turned to Dr. Phillips. Doctor, I've been hospitalized 3 times in the past 6 months, with unexplained symptoms. I'd like to know if they match what you found in Nina. Some betrayals aren't loud. They're brewed in silence and served in porcelain system today. The doctor's eyes narrowed. We'll need to run some tests to compare. Security will make sure your husband remains available for questioning. 2 security guards appeared, positioning themselves on either side of James. He looked his carefully constructed facade crumbling. Nina, and you only have to survive once to rewrite the story. They thought they'd control. He stammered. We were just trying to help you slow down. You were working too hard, taking all the big clients. Na said, if we could just make you take some time off by poisoning me. My voice was steady, even as my hands for every time I stayed silent. I took notes. And now, I spoke through evidence, shook with rage. How long have you been doing this? Was it you who tampered with my food at the Christmas party too? James's silence was all the answer I needed. Behind him, I could see Nina's room. was he lay connected to various monitors. Some betrayals aren't loud. They're brewed in silence and served in porcelain. His earlier bravado was gone, replaced by the fear of someone who knew their schemes had finally caught up with them. Detective Mendoza is on his way, Dr. Phillips said quietly. He'll want to take statements from everyone involved. I nodded, feeling a strange sense it wasn't just coffee. It was confirmation. And I never planned to drink it. Of calm, the truth was finally coming out. And this was no going back. Detective Mendoza arrived within the hour, his presence commanding attention in the sterile hospital corridor. He was a seasoned investigator who specialized in domestic abuse cases, and he listened intently as their confidence was built on my caution. But that was their mistake. I played the recording from brunch and showed his the text messages. Mrs. Bennett, he said, reviewing his notes. You mentioned previous hospitalizations. Can you tell me more about those incidents? I pulled out my phone again, opening a document I'd been quite maintaining for every time I stayed silent. I took notes. And now, I spoke through evidence for months. The first time was in February, after a dinner at Nina's house. I had severe stomach pains and dizziness. The second was in April, the tea incident, and then in June after breakfast. Then my voice remained steady as I continued each. It wasn't just coffee. It was confirmation. And I never planned to drink it. The symptoms were similar, but just different enough that the doctors couldn't pinpoint a cause. The detective's eyes narrowed as he looked at my detailed log of dates, symptoms, and circumstances. And you've been keeping records ever since I noticed the pattern. You only have to survive once to rewrite the story they thought they'd control. Hesitated before pulling out another's phone from my purse. I also started carrying a backup phone with a different number. I used it to record conversations when I was around them. I have several Wisna and James discuss their plans, though. They're careful, not some betrayals aren't loud. They're brewed in silence and served in porcelain, to be explicit. In one of the recordings, Nina's voice came through. Clearly the Henderson account is worth millions. James, we can't let his ruin everything we've worked for. Just stick to the plan. A few days of illness should be enough. James's response was what? They saw as submission was me documenting every move, waiting for the right moment, equally damning. I've got something stronger this time. He won't make it to the presentation, detective. Mendoza's expression hardened as he listened through the window of Nina's room. Could see my sister-in-law was now awake, looking significantly less confident than he had at brunch. What they saw as submission was me documenting every move, waiting for the right moment. The hospital is running toxicology screens. The detective informed me Dr. Phillips has already identified several substances that don't occur naturally. We'll need samples from your home as well. A commotion down the hall caught our attention. James was arguing with the security guards. It wasn't just coffee, it was confirmation. And I never planned to drink it. Voice rising in desperation. I need to speak with my wife, he shouted. Miles, please. You don't understand. We were trying to protect you. Detective Mendoza stepped between us. Mr. Bennett, you're not helping your case. We've already found evidence of premeditated. James laughed. I didn't just catch them. I caught every pattern they thought I'd ignore, a hollow sound that echoed through the corridor. We were just trying to slow his down. He was working. His self to death, taking all the major accounts. Na said if we could just make his take some time off by poisoning his Detective Mendoza's voice, their confidence was built on my caution. But that was their mistake, was sharp. That's not protection. Mr. Bennett, that's attempted murder. The color drained from James's face. Murder, no. That's not, we never meant to. Then what exactly did you mean to do? I asked, my voice surprisingly calm. When you put something in my coffee, you only have to survive. Wanted to rewrite the story. They thought they'd control this morning what was supposed to happen. James's silence spoke volumes behind him. I could see Na watching through his hospital room window. His face, a mask of fear and calculation. I wondered if he was trying to figure out how to spin this, how what they saw as submission was me documenting every move, waiting for the right moment to explain away months of systematic poisoning as some sort of misguided attempt at helping me. "We'll need both of their phones," Detective Mendoza told the security guards, "and I want officers posted at both doors." Nobody. Leaves until we get the toxicology results, doctor, for every time I stayed silent. I took notes, and now I spoke through evidence. Phillips entered Nina's room with a tablet in hand, his expression grim as he reviewed the test results. Detective Mendoza and I followed while James remained outside with the guards. Na tried to sit up straighter in his hospital bed, but the tremors hadn't completely what they saw as submission was me documenting every move. Waiting for the right moment subsided. The toxicology report shows elevated levels of several substances. Dr. Phillips announced, his voice clinical. Most concerning is the presence of a particular compound that's typically used in pharmaceutical testing. It's not something the general public should have access to. Narc-face paled. That's you only have to survive once to rewrite the story. They thought they'd control impossible. James said it was just something to cause mild symptoms. Mild symptoms, Detective Mendoza interrupted, taking out his notebook, like the ones your sister-in-law experienced over the past 6 months. The door opened and another detective entered. Holding an evidence bag, we found these. Some betrayals aren't loud. They're brewed in silence and served in porcelain in Mr. Bennett's office desk at the Anderson marketing firm. He reported presenting several small bottles with clinical labels along with detailed notes about dosages and reactions. I felt my knees weaken as I realized the full scope of their plan. You were documenting everything. Their confidence was built on my caution. But that was their mistake, like some kind of experiment. It wasn't like that. Nah, protested, but his voice wavered. We just needed to track what worked. The first few attempts weren't effective enough. You kept showing up to meetings anyway, so you increased the dosages. Detective Mendoza concluded, examining for every time I stayed silent. I took notes. And now, I spoke through evidence. The bottles. Did you know these substances could be lethal in highest concentrations? The room fell silent. James, still visible through the window, sank into a chair in the hallway, his head in his. "Hands the Henderson account," I said, slowly, pieces clicking into place. "You only have to survive once to rewrite the story." They thought they'd control. It wasn't just about that presentation, was it? You needed me out of the way permanently because the client specifically requested me as their lead. Narc-face contorted with a mixture of anger and fear. "You were ruining everything I built. That client portfolio. For some betrayals aren't loud. They're brewed in silence and served in porcelain. Years, and then you show up and suddenly everyone wants to work with you instead." James said he could fix it by killing me. The words hung in the air, heavy with accusation. "We weren't trying to started, but Dr. Phillips cut his off. I didn't just catch them. I caught every pattern. They thought I'd ignore the concentration in the coffee you drank today." The doctor stated, looking directly at Nina, "was significantly higher than previous samples we've analyzed from Mrs. Bennett's earlier hospital visits. If he had consumed it, the outcome would have been severe, possibly fatal." Detective Mendoza turned. "I didn't just catch them. I caught every pattern they thought I'd ignore. To the other officer we'll need a full warrant for. Both their homes and offices, and contact the pharmaceutical company listed on these bottles. Find out how they obtained these substances." Nah. Slumped back against his pillows, the fight draining from his face. "It wasn't some betrayals aren't loud. They're brewed in silence and served in porcelain. Supposed to go this far," he whispered. James kept saying, "We just needed one more try." I stepped closer to his bed, my voice steady, despite the trembling in my hands every time I got sick. "Every meeting. I missed every client. I lost you. It wasn't just coffee. It was confirmation. And I never planned to drink it. We're both this watching, taking notes on how your poison was affecting me. What kind of people does that make you?" The silence that followed was deafening outside. I could hear James being read his rights as additional. Officers arrived. Stared at his hands. "It wasn't just coffee. It was confirmation. And I never planned to drink it." Unable to meet my gaze, detective, I said, turning away from my sister-in-law. "I'm ready to make my formal statement now. The trial lasted 3 weeks, but it felt like years. I sat in the courtroom each day watching as the prosecution methodically laid out. I didn't just catch them. I caught every pattern they thought I'd ignore their case against. James and Na. The evidence was overwhelming: the bottles from James's office, their detailed notes on each poisoning attempt, the recorded conversations and text messages discussing their plans. What struck me most was their demeanor throughout the proceedings. Na, usually so polished, it wasn't just coffee, it was confirmation, and I never planned to drink it, and confident looked small in his defendant's chair. James couldn't even look at me, keeping his eyes fixed on the floor as expert witnesses detailed the potentially lethal effects of the substances they'd been using. Dr. Phillips's testimony was particularly damning. He presented a comprehensive, "Some betrayals aren't loud. They're brewed in silence and served in porcelain" analysis, showing how they had gradually increased the dosages over time, demonstrating clear intent to cause serious harm. The pharmaceutical company representative confirmed that James had stolen the compounds through his college friend, who worked in their research department. The defendants showed a calculated pattern. What they saw as submission was me documenting every move, waiting for the right moment of behavior. The prosecutor argued in his closing statement, this wasn't just corporate sabotage. It was a systematic attempt to harm Mrs. Bennett, with a clear escalation that could have resulted in death. When the verdict was finally read, I felt no joy, only relief. You only have to survive once to rewrite the story they thought they'd control. Both James and Nino were found guilty on multiple counts, including attempted murder and conspiracy. The judge's words echoed through the silent courtroom. The premeditated nature of these actions carried out against a family member over an extended period demands the maximum sentence. It wasn't just coffee, it was confirmation. And I never planned to drink it. Watched as they were led away in handcuffs, thinking about how greed and jealousy had twisted two people I once trusted into something unrecognizable. Their business, their reputations, their freedom, all sacrificed. In an attempt to destroy me 1 year after the trial, I stood. Some betrayals aren't loud. They're brewed in silence and served in porcelain at the podium of the Nashville Business Leaders Conference, preparing to give the keynote speech. The irony wasn't lost on me. This was exactly the kind of opportunity Na had tried to prevent me from achieving the Henderson account, which he and James had been for every time I stayed silent. I took notes, and now I spoke through evidence so desperate to steal had led to several more major clients establishing me as one of the top marketing executives in the region. Success isn't just about talent or hard work. I began looking out. At the sea of faces, it's about integrity, about building their confidence was built on my caution. But that was their mistake. Genuine relationships based on trust. I paused, letting my words sink in. Sometimes the biggest threats to our success come from those closest to us, but surviving those challenges makes us stronger. After my speech, several young professionals approached me seeking advice. One woman is their confidence was built on my caution, but that was their mistake. Eyes bright with determination, asked how I'd maintained my composure throughout the ordeal. I focused on what I could control. I told as I gathered evidence, trusted my instincts, and refused to let fear stop me from pursuing my goals. Later that evening, I received for every time I stayed silent. I took notes, and now I spoke through evidence an email from the Henderson client, confirming they were renewing their contract for another 3 years. I smiled, thinking about how differently things might have turned out if I hadn't trusted my instincts. That day at brunch, the local paper had run a small article. It wasn't just coffee, it was confirmation. And I never planned to drink it that morning, about Na and James beginning their prison sentences. I didn't read it instead. I focused on the proposal for my newest client project, knowing that the best revenge wasn't about getting, even it was about moving forward and succeeding. Despite those who I didn't just catch them, I caught every pattern they thought I'd ignore, tried to hold you back.